There is something viscerally pleasing about punching someone in the face. I would be lying if I said that I wouldn't know. There's a reason why boxing is a spectator sport, why people will shout fight when two combatants throw down, why Ed Gruberman wanted to beat people up right now, and why when you're flipping channels looking for something to watch, you always stop on Bruce Lee. That brings me to the monk, D&D's odd man out when it comes to the various classes. It never really fit in mechanically or in the background. There's an old joke that the 20th level monk is the apology for the first level monk. Fluff-wise, it's cribbed directly from the martial arts movies of the 70s and 80s, with equal parts wushu and street brawling, starting with the original art of a Japanese samurai riding a kairin, which originates in Korean mythology. It makes a strange mishmash of adjacent but different cultures. Despite all these problems, people still want to throw hands with a dragon. Time to finally deflect the issues of the past and strike at the heart of the problem. I'm Mr. Welch, and prepare to boot to face. First edition monk goes back to the Oriental Adventurer's Guide from first edition, with credit to Gary Gygax as the person who came up with the concept, along with Francois Marcel Freudeval, a French RPG designer who is attributed to coining the phrase munchkin for power gamers. The actual design of the book is given to Zeb Cook because that man was everywhere back in the halcyon days of TSR. The actual history of the book's creation and who did what is long, complicated, controversial, and outside the scope of this video. The original Oriental Adventures was a bit of an unbalanced mess, but it was at the height of the Kung Fu craze in the US, which explains the timing. It wasn't a true conversion of Asian mythology, martial arts, or folklore, but how they looked on Saturday afternoon Kung Fu theater at 1 o'clock p.m. on KTRK. Players didn't want to roleplay an actual Shaolin monk, but the Jet Li version of a Shaolin master. It was the same attitude towards Western medieval stereotypes. People didn't want to do knightly stuff, but they still wanted to be King Arthur. The issue was monks didn't fit in with the playstyle of D&D because Bruce Lee would have a problem punching through plate mail. Thus, the perpetual problem of the monk began. It was a frontline fighter that couldn't use armor, did minimal damage because unarmed combat was underwhelming, started with few hit points. In first edition, it was 2d4 hit dice to start, and a d4 every level after that. To add injury to insult, monks were on a slow progression chart like a paladin or a ranger. They had to earn 2200 XP for second level, 200 more experience points than a fighter. You thought the wizard had a hard time. They did get a key bonus for saving throws to avoid all damage from a magic attack, 1 day per level. Against swords, not so much. You got a whole host of additional skills, all of which did very little to keep you upright when a battle started. At 17th level, you got all your Amazeball abilities, including a 55% chance to hear noise like a thief, 3 attacks a round, 4 extra dice of damage per hit, a blisteringly insane movement speed, a base -3 armor class, and of course Quivering Palm, assuming the monk didn't fail a saving throw against Fireball between now and first level. I have no idea why people decided to stick with the monk after all of that. I take that back. I know precisely why people stuck with it. Oriental Adventures was one of the best-selling first edition books ever made. Never underestimate the desire for people to punch other people in the head, even if it's make-believe. Skip a bit, and the monk is now in 5th edition, and it's considered one of the worst classes available, especially if you listen to the people who believe the only way to play is the Church of the Almighty +1. That's the one we're going to fix. I'm not addressing the people complaining that this is being Asian-themed and therefore cultural appropriation, but then they turn around and protest when the game designer suggests dropping it because that removes Asian representation from the game. Well, pick a side. You can't have it both ways, unless you just want to be paid to shut up. Which is the reason I will never work with a sensitivity reader. You want to know the difference between a sensitivity reader and an awesomeness editor? The reader tells you that you can't include something because it offends them, and they represent everybody else in their culture. The awesomeness editor is the guy that finds out that you're writing a game based on Japanese lore, and reminds you to include the part where a samurai killed another guy with a boat oar because his opponent wasn't worthy of being killed by his sword. On a side note, and speaking of awesomeness, major thanks to Mr. Tex over at the Black Pants Legion and all you other guys for sending me a copy of Oriental Adventures to help with this video. It was one of the few first edition books I didn't have, and it was a massive help in making this video. Go check out the Black Pants Legion and ask Tex when he's going to get the Hunchback video finished. So what's the problem with the 5th edition monk? Well, first off, it's problems, as in plural. This thing is a mess. It doesn't do much damage. It gets 1 hit point less on average per level than a fighter. The armor class is tied to multiple stats in a setting where you only get enough good stats to have 2 decent abilities. You rarely see a monk that can pass the bar exam or understand the concept of deodorant. It's all wisdom, dexterity, and constitution. And strength if you can wing it. They have a lot of magical abilities that don't affect a lot of monsters. Monks tend to go and catch a film when it comes time to fight undead because their powers don't match up well. Unless you're playing a Franciscan, in which case ignore and reverse everything I just said about what abilities you need. I know what you're asking, and the answer is for the better. That's how I would change the monk. But the 5e monk has too many problems tied to 5th edition's game design, with the oversaturation of magic and its focus on crutch powers, much like the warlock, barbarian, and druid. In the monk's case, it's chi, which is being changed to discipline, which might be a bit more problematic when you combine that word with a class designed to physically punish people. I'll show you discipline. At least 5e monks can't use the whip, which makes no sense because that was one of the weapons that they did practice in, at least according to what Saturday afternoon Kung Fu Theater taught me, including Master of the Flying Guillotine. Especially Master of the Flying Guillotine. Can we redesign the monk and keep it looking like the better parts of Gymkata? Oh yeah. Can we separate the monk from the fact that it requires ki to work properly and a bunch of magical abilities that only come into play occasionally, but every subclass has to be magical? No. The monk deals less damage than the fighter because they can't pick up a D10 weapon and start hitting people with it, or else they lose their cool monk powers. They are there to spam Stunning Strike and run away when faced with an actual threat, kind of like the rogue but without all the valuable skills. So we will not be recreating the magical Asian man who specialized in paralyzing titty twister attacks. The monk is dead. Long live the Fistinator. We will need help, specifically from other games that did martial arts better. One issue with the monk is it's trying to represent many different martial arts styles, but the mechanics are all the same. We need to vary the build of the martial artist to make them different, but keep the theme. Fortunately, I know a guy that can help. I met him in a village once when I was vacationing after college.
For you, the day bison graced your village was the most important day of your life. But for me, it was Tuesday.
Whatever, I still need your help. The Street Fighter RPG is one of the best martial art RPGs ever made, and you can find a fan-made clone relatively easily. It broke martial arts into various moves. Each style had access to specific moves, some purely physical, other requiring key points. You could build radically different fighters from the same school just by picking different moves. Now port this concept over to 5th edition. Martial art moves are now like Battlemaster maneuvers. If you want to use the Kip-Up ability, which lets you ignore a knockdown, you spend 1 key point, and it's done. If you want to throw a fireball or the equivalent of a flaming hand spell, you spend 3 key points and you duplicate the spell. A spinning roundhouse back kick will cost so many key points compared to the ability to run up walls. You get more martial arts from your provided list when you hit a certain level. Subclasses will have specific moves unique to those options. Do you want to add magic to the Fistinator? It comes in the subclasses. The baseline Fistinator is an unarmed melee guy without any magic from the start. It's how they progress is what makes them different. You might discover the secret of Taekwon Leap during the course of play. But first, you have all the training as a Glasgow barfly. And maybe not that much. Now to fix the monk's ability to put foot to face as much as the other classes do. They don't do as much damage as the guys with sharpened sticks do, nor should they. Weapons are force multipliers. There's a reason why you don't want to get punched with brass knuckles. What they do have as an advantage is speed. There's no backswing on a jab. Bruce could punch you multiple times before you could wind up a baseball bat. There's a reason why I keep going to Mr. Lee, because he's the template for the Hollywood martial artist. He's the baseline I'm using for the Fistinator. Fighters get up to 4 attacks a turn at the high levels, something no other class can do, not even other martial types. Guess the barbarian was too busy staying angry at his ex-wife to learn how to swing again. The monk can only attack twice. Why? Because they get flurry of blows. 2 extra strikes for a point of ki. You're spending a resource to gain extra attacks that still do less damage. Keep giving the Fistinator extra attacks until you hit 4 attacks per turn, and then you can still use flurry of blows. Is this an insane number of attacks? Yes, it's a monk. Attack speed is their bread and butter. If you want to do this many attacks, you had best keep playing until high level. But that requires Wizards of the Coast not to front-load classes, so all the cool stuff is acquired before level 10. That's for another video. Now that we're restomping the groin 6 times around, on to the next complaint. The fact is, you need a lot of attribute points to make a monk work. We don't even need Raul Julia to fix this one. Though I'm sure if I looked hard enough, he could provide a better solution. Raul Julia fixes everything. Add extra ability score increases. The fighter gets 7 ability score increases compared to the monk's 5. Give the monk the same amount, or even go up to 8. This makes sense because the monks need a lot of ability score increases. They don't need a lot of feats. They tend to be self-containing regarding combat abilities. This change also unlocks one of the most iconic parts of all martial arts, the training montage. You are getting more stat increases because you're putting more effort into learning them. You don't see the fighter standing on a pier practicing his crane kick at daybreak. You'll never catch a wizard walking up a staircase on his hands. The bard isn't filling out the daily crossword puzzle every morning before the coffee is ready. Fistinators are about improving their bodies and minds and rewarding them for sticking with their class instead of multiclassing as fast as possible. It's up to you to provide the inspirational 80s pop ballad to accompany you on your run up that mountain, but Foreigner is a classic standby. As far as the rest of the stuff goes, you can keep it the same. The increased speed, the increasing damage dice, those are fine. I would even go so far and have your Fistinator regain spent ki on a critical hit because you're regaining clarity through the confidence when you lay down a particularly epic smackdown. You're going for the quantity over quality side of melee. You get a ton of attacks that do less damage. Embrace that aspect. This simplifies the monk quite a bit, but it opens up to even greater customization and changes later. If you want a guy whose body glows when he fights, there's a subclass for that. There's also a subclass for the guy that doesn't want to learn all that mystic crap and just wants to punch people. The unifying theme behind both of these characters, aside from their love of Foreigner's excellent Rocky IV soundtrack, is they have an uncanny focus during their fights. They're hyper alert while they're punching people. Tie their current level of discipline, ki, glow, or whatever you want to call the power currency that monks use, to more abilities. Ditch the current unarmored defense as written. Instead, replace the bonus armor class from your wisdom to your current amount of power currency remaining. This represents the monk staying alert to his surroundings and dodging things from different angles of attack because he can see them coming. Cap it at early levels. You get +1 armor class for every point of glow remaining to a maximum of +3. This later increases to +5 and then maybe +7 at high levels. Then it's a trade-off. Do you make all of your big fancy martial arts moves early and drain your discipline points? Or do you reserve some and keep up your defense? Keep the D8 hit die. This makes the decision tougher. But again, it's only 1 hit point less than a fighter on average, so it's not a significant loss. I'm still not a fan of using monks in most campaigns, but this gives you options that the current version doesn't have. You can limit what's allowed by restricting subclasses. A gladiator trained in the cestus can still be used in a Western European style game where a kung fu master would be out of place. It's a lot easier to plug and play a Fistinator into a D&D campaign because it's far more modular. It keeps to the original idea of the martial arts without trying to tie it to a singular concept past Bruce Lee punching people a lot. Those were my ideas on the monk and how to fix it. I hope it helps. Until next time, remember, boards don't hit back.